Okay, so my name is Radosław Kycia and I'm a colleague of Maciej. Yes, my talk will be about practical applications of clustering. I hope you see my screen. Yes?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, so maybe I will put it like this. Okay, so thank you for the invitation, and I'm representing here mainly Kraków University of Technology, Faculty of, say, Informatics, so formally Computer Science and Telecommunications, but I am also an employee at Masaryk University in Czech Republic. So my probably many of you know me from more mathematical presentations, but this year I plan to present something from different discipline like machine learning, because now it's of my main concern last year and this year. Okay, so let's start. First of all, I would like to say something about Professor Julian Ławrynowicz, because I know him, I knew him personally. I met him very late in his life, but what struck me, and it was quite amazing about him, it was that his mind was very sharp, even in this age, and he was very, I would say, broad in scientific interest, and this various interest reflects in this hyper complex seminar conference, in which there was plenty of subjects and disciplines represented by very nice scientists, and I learned a lot as a young scientist at this conference, and also meet very nice people. Most of you are here, and start very nice collaborations. But I will say maybe something more about these collaborations later. Okay, so I was very impressed by Professor's person, and as a scientist, it was very nice to know him. Okay, so let's go to the overview of this talk. So because this is plenary talk, I plan it as a basic introduction to machine learning, because this conference is very broad in topics. So I plan to like systematize the machine learning subjects, for example, for mathematicians and for physicists, just to be very elementary. So the first part is about machine learning. I present types of machine learning. Then I present some selected methods which I used in my research, mainly PCA, K-means, and GMIM. I will explain it later. And then I will present two applications which we obtained with my collaborators, which are very nice, I would say. First is connected with the application of machine learning to checking the quality of grape seeds, which can be used to produce wines and oils. I will also say more about this later. And the second one, which is quite different from the first one, is use, well, the same methods to check how Generation Z is motivated. Generation Z means the people from which now enters the marketplace or start to be employees. So grown people which starts to be value employees in corporations or companies. Okay, so let's start. First, I will present the basic facts about machine learning. Sorry. Okay, so the first example is about, or first slide is about the types of the data which we can encounter in our research. So here are classical results about the iris flowers. Well, the data which are used mostly in machine learning about these flowers are related to the length and width of some specific leaves or in the flowers. Here they are marked in these yellow arrows, and the data which are gathered are sepal length, sepal width, petal length, petal width, and they are associated with labels, which means the specific genre of these iris flowers. So from this data, we can extract two main features. Like the first one are features. They are these lengths of this petal and sepal stuff. And in machine learning, that they are called features or attributes or measurement or dimensions. And the second one, sometimes it's not present, but in this case it is. It's called labels or class labels or targets. And if these class labels are present, then if we try to do machine learning, then we call this machine learning supervised because we have these labels. And if they are not present, then we cannot say to which class we have each column associated. And in this case, we call it, the machine learning is called unsupervised machine learning. And there are more I would say nomenclature, but mostly they can be split into supervised and non-supervised machine learning. Okay, so this say 2 or 3 machine learning are supervised learning when we have these class labels or data labels. And from this learning, we have direct outcome, which means that if we plug in new data, new features, then we get new class labels. And of course, they can be good or not. We can check how good we are. But mainly, we get these class labels or prediction about these class labels. And the second one is unsupervised learning or unsupervised machine learning, where we don't have any labels. And our task is to find out how many labels are good for describing this data. So there is no direct outcome, but this approach is not about, well, it's also about labeling, but the aim is more about finding hidden structure of the data. So finding some connections between data or some hidden structure inside. I will show it on these 2 examples at the end of my talk. What I mean about this hidden structure more precisely. And there is also the third type, which is called reinforced learning. Sorry, there should be no data about learning. It is something which is connected with supervised learning, but we learn in progress. I mean that we start to learn the system, and then when we add additional data, then we reinforce the output of the system by giving some I would say presence or enforcing the system to predict better and better when the new data arrives. So it's something which is connected with supervised learning, but it's like online learning, I would say. Okay, but we will focus on unsupervised learning because it's more better in my applications, which I present soon. Okay, and now what is learning? What is machine learning? So here is very nice plot, which was taken from the documentation of Python library scikit-learn, which shows how this learning looks like. So on the left you have 3 pictures of the data, and they are the colors are the colors match these class labels. Well, basically there are 2 colors like red and blue, and each of this is different label. And the machine learning and XY axis are some features, like for example height of the person and the weight of the person, or something like this, or sepal length, sepal width. Of course, there can be more dimensions, but in 2 dimensions it's better visible what machine learning is. So that's why I presented here this 2-dimensional example. So we have 2 classes, say red and blue. And the machine learning well, it relies on selecting such algorithm which split the whole domain, this two-dimensional or multi-dimensional space, into domains in which separates the best that the most red or blue points belongs to the one domain, which is associated with this label. So, for example, the data in the first row, they are well, maybe not nicely, but they are very well. They are separated linearly, at least. What I mean that if we draw some line or hyperplane in higher dimensions, then we separate this domain into two regions where the most points, red points, lie in this upper part, and the most blue points lie in the lower part. And as you see, and as we progress from the left to the right, there are different boundaries. Like, for example, we can choose lines or hyperplanes, or we can choose some different, very nasty, I would say, borderlines. And these borderlines are associated with algorithms which we choose. For example, some algorithms can split the whole domain only using lines, and some algorithms can split it using this more curved borders. So the main I would say part of the data scientist's work is to find the proper algorithm which can split the data properly, or at least classifying, for example, in this case, classifying less points red into blue domain, for example, or the otherwise. So the main aim is to properly choose algorithm to split this domain into the best way possible. And if data are not separable, for example, linearly, then you have to choose another algorithm which can do different separation, or, for example, you can also initially transform data just to make it linearly separable, or some kind of separable, just to apply proper algorithm. So that's the main idea of the machine learning. I sometimes teach machine learning and always show this picture because it very nicely explains what is machine learning. It's a very simple idea, but of course the algorithms are very complicated. So some are simple and some are very complicated that you cannot explain it looking on the code, because code is very big. Okay, anyway, that's the idea. Okay, so now what kind of pipeline we used to our examples, to our research? It's only one pipeline. Of course, you can mix all these methods available, and there's plenty of these methods to create your own pipeline. But we found that this one is very nicely applicable in many situations. I mean, in unsupervised learning. Okay, so it's very simple. It's a linear process. Like, start with we do correlation analysis just to find out some correlations inside the data. Sometimes we omit this part. It depends on the data. For example, for generation Z analysis, we use correlation analysis just to find out which question in our querenda correlates. But in this wine analysis, we doesn't use this part. And the next part is something which is called principal component analysis, or PCA in short. It is some kind of compression of the data. For example, if you have multidimensional data, then some algorithms doesn't deal well in a multidimensional case. So you try to compress data to lower dimensionality. And you have to do it in smart ways. So I will present how it looks like soon. So if you compress this data to lower dimensions, then you can start to find some hidden structure. And we found out that there are two nice algorithms which works efficiently in our cases. The first one is k-means. It search for clustering of the points in this lower dimensional space, the data which are preprocessed using this PCA in the first place. And then after this, we have some initial hints about clusters. And after that, we put this initial guess to the Gaussian mixture model, this GMM. And then we found we find the proper mixture of different components or different structures in the data. And this is our final algorithm which we used in our processing. Okay, so that's the general overview, and then now I will give you some more details about these methods. Okay, so the first method is principal component analysis, and it's based on very simple idea. So, for example, let's look on some signals. So, assume that the x-axis is the time. So you look on some kind of time series. And y-axis is some value of, say, amplitude of something, or amplitude of signal. And then the question is which signal, this one, which is flat signal, or say constant signal, or two, which is not flat, not flat, carries more information. So in order to answer this question, we look on, for example, the first one, and we see that it's flat. So if we provide one value, then we fully describe this signal. So it employs or use less information to restore this signal. And in the second case, we have some, okay, say sine wave or something which varies. And now you have to provide a value in each point to describe the signal. So you have to provide more information about this. And the clue here is that the signal which has more variation, roughly speaking, carries more information. So the information is associated in the change in the signal. So you have, so in order to say compress a signal, you have to be very careful about preserving its variation. Yeah, so that's the clue idea behind this PCA. So the more varied is signal, the more information it carries, and you, during compression, you have to preserve this variation in some sense. Okay, so here is the idea of principal component analysis. So principal component analysis. Here is two-dimensional case. So we have x1 feature and x2 feature. So we have two features in the signal. So the data are points in two-dimensional space. And now we rotate this signal using the covariation matrix. And this matrix is, in this case, is square matrix. So we can adjust our new axis to the eigenvectors of this matrix. So we rotate the whole space just to make or select new coordinate system to match the eigenvalues of the covariance matrix. And for example, the the algorithm works like the first axis carries the highest value of the variation of the signal. The second axis is the second in the value of the variation, or carries the second part of the, I would say, or second importance in the variation, and so on. So you can, for example, cut off the higher components of these eigenvectors, and you are left, for example, with two axes or with three axes in higher dimensional space. So that's the idea of this compression. So you look only on this eigenvectors which carries the most significant part of the variation, and you get rid of these higher terms which carries less variations or less significant part of the variation. So that's the idea, and it's connected with this information, because the more variation, the more information you carry. Okay, so that's the idea. Of course, algorithm is much more complicated, but the idea is as I presented here. Okay, and after you pre-process your data using this PCA, you can start doing some kind of finding the structure. In this new coordinate system, reduced to only a few axes or dimensions, you can look on some kind of grouping of the points. And if you note this grouping, like here we can see that there are 3 clusters. We can employ some algorithm which can find these clusters, and there's plenty of this algorithm. One of the basic and very good is K-means. It minimizes variation within the cluster, or mean value from the centroid, which is the different name for the center of the cluster. So the input for this algorithm is how many clusters we want to find. For example, here we see 3 clusters, and we plug that we want 3 clusters, and our algorithm should find out something like this. So it should find 3 groups of the points, or 3 groups of the clusterings of clusters. And of course, it also finds the centroid of the cluster, so the centers of the cluster. It's something like finding the distribution of the mass, or the centers of the distribution of the mass for given number of these centers. It's very closely connected with this algorithm. Okay, so this algorithm starts from the points and give you the clusters and the centers of these clusters, and of course the points which belongs to these clusters. Okay, so that was the first input for our pipeline. So the number of the clusters and the center of the clusters. And then we plug it into a Gaussian mixture model. And the idea is also simple for this model, because we have some kind of points. And now we fit to these points the Gaussians. So we have to fix the number of the Gaussians we want to fit. And then we make combination of this Gaussian and try to fit its, variation or weight and the position of the maximum for each Gaussian. And the algorithms can do it automatically, of course. Each Gaussian represents each component in the signal or inside the data, and and the amplitude of the Gaussian presents the importance of this contribution to the model from each Gaussian or each component. So idea is also very simple. Of course, realization is much more complicated, but of course it's only the coding or numerics, so it's not so important, I would say. Okay, so a Gaussian mixture model algorithm needs some inputs to start the finding this Gaussian, and usually it's the initial position of the centroid, so the centers of the cluster. And we can, for example, in Python libraries, by default, there is at the beginning there is a K-means algorithm which finds this initial position of the centroids, and after that GMM starts and finds this Gaussian contribution or Gaussian mixtures. And we use these mixtures to describe these hidden components in our data. For example, it is good to describe hidden class or grouping of the elements in experimental data which we encountered, which I present soon. Okay, so now our results. I present 2 results. First one is about wines, and second about generations. Okay, so the first one is about wines and oils quality. Okay, so this is our paper if someone is interested in the details. It was published recently in scientific reports, and yeah. So at the beginning I said that this conference and was very nice in starting interesting scientific collaboration. So one of this collaboration resulted in this paper, and it was collaboration with Agnieszka Niemczynowicz, which was also a PhD student of Professor Ławrynowicz. And we did this paper. It was founded from European Union funding and some Czech fundings at Masaryk University and from, say, Czech grant agency. Okay, so what about this approach? So it was related to the grapes in Czech Republic, because data was gathered for the Czech grapes, and maybe some overview how the wine production looks like in Czech Republic. So there are mainly two regions which are connected with wine production. The first one, I would say the biggest one, is this Moravia wine region. It's the South Moravia part of the Czech Republic. It's located close to Brno. Brno is the second largest city in Czech Republic. The Praga is the capital, and that is the first city. Okay, and it's the south of this Brno region, and it has a lot of wines produced. The second one is this Bohemia wine region. It's smaller because it's more north, so the climate is quite colder there. But the South Moravia is much warmer. Like, from my experience, it's like 2 or 3 temperature is 2 or 3 degrees higher than in Krakow, for example, which I am based. Okay, so these wines are produced, and then the byproduct of these wines are seeds, which can be used to produce oils. And our task was to find the proper method to describe the quality of these seeds. And of course, after this, we can say if it's good to produce from these byproducts oils. And of course, this quality is very useful in production, because using say computer methods, we can say very quickly how good these seeds are for producing oils. Okay, so let's look on the spectra of these seeds. Here is the plot from our paper. And as you see, well, on the x-axis there's wave number, so we shine the light on the seeds, roughly speaking, and on the y-axis we have absorbance, so how many light was absorbed by these seeds. So these peaks represents the reaction of the seeds for the light in this at given wave number, at given length. And we see characteristics peaks, which are some kind of DNA of these samples. But you see that there is a few say grapes presented, and these lines are very close together. By naked eyes, it's barely visible the difference. Yeah, so that's why we need some preprocessing or machine learning methods to make these small differences much more visible, or to distinguish these closely related spectra to make it more distant, to see the difference, the true difference. Okay, so that was our initial data. And after making a PCA, so we compressed this data to a few dimensions, but generally the two dimensions. So each point here on this plot was one feature, and we compressed this a lot of features only to 2 dimensions. And we project these PCI components to only two. The first one carried 81% of the variance, so it's very, very large number. And the second one only 14 number, but we left it because we need at least 2 dimensions to see some clusters. And it's standard in this analysis. So the first component should carry at least 70% of the variation. Our result was 81, so it was quite reasonable. Okay, and as you see in this plot, there are visible some clusters. And in order to pick the proper number of the clusters, we use standard trig in this clustering. So we plot the sum of the square distances from the centroids for a given number of the clusters, and we change the number of the clusters. And usually on this plot you see some kind of elbow. So the point where the elbow breaks, it's the point where the best number of the clusters for this approach is possible. So in this case, we select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clusters because of this elbow methods, this trick. And after applying this Cummins algorithm, we see that it more or less finds the proper position of the cluster. So the first centroid is here. This is this red cross. And it consists of Riesling, Hibernal, and Savignon grapes. Of course, these names are also connected with wines which are produced in Czech Republic. Okay, the second cluster consists of Palava and Don Felder. The third, Nuremberg and Pinot Gris. Here the red dot is the next cluster, and the green dot is the last cluster, I would say. Okay, so we see some nice distinction, and now we try to apply on this just to make sure that this clustering is okay. The second method, which is Gaussian mixture model, and here is the result. It's well, yes. So this clustering is more or less the same. But it's more, I would say, more precise, because instead of yes or no answers for belonging to the cluster, we get the full Gaussian parameters. The parameters are written exactly in our paper. I don't want to present it here, but we see, for example, that here's one of the big Gaussian center, which consists of Treming, Palava, and Don Felder grapes. And yeah, and for example, this wine is, or this grape is out of big Gaussian. It belongs to the small Gaussian, which is centered mostly on this point. So, and how we, well, there are plenty of Gaussian parameters, so we have to choose some of Gaussians. For example, we can choose the spherical Gaussian, which has spherical symmetry, or Gaussian which has only full covariance matrix with different coefficients, or well, there is at least 4 choices, for canonical choices. For example, in Scikit Python library, there are 4 choices, and there are spherical Gaussians, tight Gaussians, diagonal covariance matrix in Gaussian, or full Gaussian matrix, which is each component of this covariance matrix can be varied. So we have to choose one of these Gaussian types, and usually it is done using Bayesian information criteria. It means that there is some kind of coefficient which say you how good is Gaussian model for given set of parameters. And the lower the value of this big is, the better. So for example, if you plan to use 5 Gaussians, five mixtures of the Gaussians, then you have to try to fit all these models and see which is the lowest. For example, for 5 numbers of the Gaussians, the lower is this, say, yellow or pink. orange, and it corresponds to the full Gaussian. So Gaussian with the full covariance matrix. So, for example, we use 5 clusters and this full model, and we get this result. So that's the mechanics of the using this method, this GMM. First, you try to compute big scores for different number of the clusters. You find out which for given number of the cluster method gives you the lowest big, and after that you try to do proper fit. Of course, starting point is the initial position of the clusters, which you can supply from this Cummins clustering from the previous slide. Okay, and the same method we applied for chemical compounds analysis. So our chemists give us acid components of these grapes, and analyzing these components using the same. Oops, I hope you see me because I have some information about unstable connection, but I think it's okay. For now, we do the same clustering, and we get mostly the same clusters as in the previous slides. So our method is stable in the sense that 2 different approaches, one from the spectrum, one from the chemical analysis, give the same distinction. Okay, and as a story or digression, I asked one of my friends, which is connoisseur of the wines, of Czech wines, he's a Czech person, that if he see this clustering, I mean that if in taste can he distinct these different groups or clusters of the wines, and he said that he's not so precise to distinguish it, but maybe someone with better taste or a better experience, maybe he can or she can distinguish it. Anyway, it's very difficult to distinguish it, at least for ordinary person which has some experience in wine tasting. Okay, so the second example, which relates on the same method, also it's joint work with Agnieszka Nieprzynowicz and some collaboration within the Europe. I mean, with Olsztyn from Agnieszka. Agnieszka is from Olsztyn, Toruń, Brno. I represented Brno, Porto, and Riga. We try to find the answer for the question, what motivates Generation Z? I mean, motivates at workplace. Okay, and this was supported by Navagrant, it's Polish exchange research agency. And the paper was published in the proceedings of IBIMA conference. It is conference related to management, sociology, and all this stuff related to people's behavior, I would say. Okay, so first, what is Generation Z? So here is the plot from the Wikipedia, which presents the span of different generations. For example, the generations which was born between 1883 to 19, it is called lost generation. For example, this silent generation, it started his adult life at the beginning of the war, Second World War. So it was a silent generation. I think that the name is about this. Baby boomers is the generation which results from the big baby boom after the war. Well, I'm from millennials, I would say. Maybe you are from different generations. And what we focus on was Generation Z, which was born between 1997 and 2012. And after that, there is new generation, Generation Alpha, which is the newest generation, which started to born very recently. This is the last date at which he or she or these members of the generation start to be born. Okay, so we focus on Generation Z. Okay, and the questions is how to motivate and engage, at workplace this Generation Zs or Zs, and what are main factors for Generation Z employees to make appreciate the people from this generation their job. So everything is focused on how to motivate people from Generation Z to make their work with engagement and make it very good. So make good quality of the work. Okay, so maybe something about the data gathering process. So the questionnaire was conducted in 2018. This was just before the COVID situation, and currently we also gather new data for COVID. Well, we have one part of the data already gathered, and the second is in progress. And for this 2018 data, we have 200 participants from Generation Z. It was, in each country which was in the project, we gathered this data, and in the data there was a mixture of any generation, but we selected from this data these participants of Generation Z, and it occurs that it was about 200 people inside. And these people has various belongs to various companies. I mean, the micro companies, there are multinational companies which these people represents, and also various educational backgrounds. Some people finish on the high school, and some finish the studies. Some have also say PhDs. So there is various backgrounds, and it's very nice because we have many factors to analyze. And first step was the correlation analysis. So here is the correlation matrix. It's Spearman correlation coefficients presented. And on the X and the Y axis, there are questions. There are questions. The test consists of many questions, and these questions were divided into groups. For example, this engagement group was question number 5, or set of the questions of number 5, and there was 20 questions inside this group, and we see correlation of these questions. These questions which are highly correlated are more pink, I would say. So, for example, this question 1 and question 2 is very highly correlated. It's about half. And here is the group. Also, questions from 16 to 20 are also very highly correlated and forms of group. Yeah. So analyzing these correlations, we could say something about the nature of these correlations. And this is the first group. So the first group represents or correlates the questions which say something about general satisfactions from the work. So the questions are as follows. So first question is, I'm very satisfied with the work I do. The second, my job is interesting. We could see that the first and second is very highly correlated. And then 16th questions is also correlated with these two. I think this organization is a great place to work. 17, I believe I have a great future in this organization, and so on. So we see that this first and second is highly correlated with these last questions. And then this is this first group. So general satisfaction from the work. And it's quite reasonable to see this correlation, because all these questions are more or less about the same. So it's some kind of sanity check for our questionnaire. Okay, the second group concerns the learning opportunities at the workplace. And in this group are the two questions. My job is interesting, and second one is I get plenty of opportunities to learn in this job. So the more opportunities to learn in the job are present, the more interesting is the work. So that's the output for this from this correlation. Okay, the third group is connections which connects challenging work, how challenging work is, with the prospect for the future. So if people see that they are expected to do something interesting, then they are more satisfied, I would say, from the work, or see that the company starts to develop or has a brighter future. So in this group are questions like, my job is challenging, I think this organization is a great place to work, I believe I have great future in this organization. Okay, so the last two are highly correlated because they are more or less the same questions. But this challenging part is uncorrelated. Well, it's correlated highly, but it's not, well, at first sight, it's not related, at least thinking reasonable. But from this analysis, it looks like that challenging work is related to this great future at the workplace. Okay, the fourth group is connects the quality of tools and facilities offered by the company with a great prospect for the future. So, roughly speaking, if company has shiny new tools to use at the workplace, then probably it's good company because it can afford the company for to buy these tools to buy these tools for the work. And the fifth group is clustering, which relates which is related with the boss. So there are three questions. I have a lot of support from my boss. My boss is recognize my work. I like working with my boss. Yeah, so they are very closely connected, and it is reflected with this correlation analysis. And the sixth group indicates the relationship with the boss and satisfaction from work. So boss is a very important factor in our analysis. So I like working with my boss. This is the first question. And the second one, which is correlated, is I think the organization is a great place to work. So we see what is the very good, what is the main factor for thinking that the workplace is a good place to work for these generations that people. So relation with boss. Okay, and now so correlation analysis was the first step. The second one is Cummins. So we also do this PCA. We restrict our space to 3 dimensions. So the first component was projected to carried 21% of the variance. The second was 9%. The third one 7%. And yeah, and here are these questions, and you can also see some kind of clusters. We also do this elbow trick to find the proper or the best number of the clusters. And these clusters from Cummins or centers of these clusters are marked with these red crosses. So we see that more or less they corresponds to this clustering. And after that, we try to find out what this cluster represents. So the first class represents or connects interest in the job with challenging tasks at workplace. So the same as we see in this correlation. Class 1 represents the relationship with the boss. And this also reflects the highly correlated things in this correlation analysis. The second class, well, I start to number it from 0, like in Python. So the first index is index 0, not 1. The second class, or the third in the proper numbering, is connection between satisfaction from the workplace with the quality of the products of the company, which is also reasonable. The third class aggregates questions that show that clear statement of work responsibilities help employees manage to work and have good balance with life and work. It was not reflected in a correlation analysis, so it was very, I would say, fruitful for us or useful because it shows that if people has very clear statement of their responsibilities at work, then they feel much better at workplace, or they know what to do. So that's very important for employees. Okay, class 4 connects the intent of to work for the organization with the way the company carries its business. So it's also reasonable. Almost every this class is very reasonable, but some of them are unexpected, I would say. Class 5 represents the connection between freedom at workplace and the quality of facilities and equipment at workplace. Class 6 represents opportunities to learn and work, and they do not aggregate in this, well, they do not aggregate with other classes, so it's a 1-point class. And in correlation analysis, they aggregate with great prospect for future, but in this analysis, they don't aggregate. This point don't aggregate, doesn't aggregate. Class 7 represents initiative to do work well, which is unrelated to other questions. It's also 1-point class. So yeah. And here's the next step. It's Gaussian Gaussian mixture model, and it also gets give you some clusters, and these clusters represents more or less the same classes that represents this Cummins model. There are some small differences, but more or less it's the same. So it only shows that our procedure converges in using these two methods. Okay, so I will not read it carefully. Okay, here are these 7 clusters in this case. And a summary of this part is that this analysis suggests the following approach to construct motivation system in companies for Generation Z. So interesting and challenging work is connected with employees' satisfaction. So if people see or feel that they do something challenging and I would say important, then it gives these employees satisfaction from workplace. It's if work is boring, then they don't feel this satisfaction. And also, clear statement about the responsibilities of employees is the key to attain life-work balance for these people, for Generation Z. And it's very important for motivation system, especially for, say, balance, psychological balance for these people. Also, the connection with the boss or the relation with the boss is very important for Generation Z, or well, for every people, but for Generation Z is very important. It was visible from at least from the correlation and this clustering. And also the quality of the products and how company conducts its business is related with how employees see their future in the company. So if they see that the products are very valuable or the services are very good, which this company represents, then they feel that it will be a very nice place to work and it has very bright future because people probably will buy the products. So there will be money which for salaries. That's the interpretation of this part. Okay, so that's all what I wanted to present. I hope that this simple analysis, because it's very basic in terms of machine learning, showed you that even this simple analysis can extract very nice relations in various data. Okay, and we do a lot more about this analysis, so please stay tuned and see our next papers. And about the bibliography and some photos which I stole from various publications. So if you are interested in this machine learning, for example, if you are mathematicians and try to understand more deeply the methods which I presented, or even more methods which I didn't present it, you can look in this Sebastian Raszka book, which is very nice and very deep in presentation. It's very elementary, but it's very good starting point for learning machine learning. And our 2 papers, which are also the base sources for my presentation. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you for your attention and thank you for invitation. I hope everything was clear. If not, please ask me now because now it's the time for the questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Radek. Yes, we have very little time until the next presentation. Maybe one or two quick questions. Professor Zubert?
Did you try to use linear discrimination analysis or normal discrimination analysis instead of PCA? Because PCA is used to...
You mean about LDA, yes? Well, we have to decide to choose one of these compression methods, and PCA was good enough for us. Sometimes we also used PCA with varimax rotation, but it's just to make this rotation or this alignment along this eigenvectors better. But PCA is enough for us. We don't need anything, but we check it. Yeah, of course.
Comparison is interested. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, the LDA is very good for example, for natural language processing. But for these applications, it's not good. I would say PCA is better.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you. And we have one more question. Oh, two more questions.
Yes, first of all, I'd say that was very interesting and a lot of information. And I wonder if all these analyses might be done with using just a simple software like R.
Yes, so yeah, that's a good question. So on the market, there are two ways to do this advanced machine learning. So first one is Python and libraries like scikit-learn. And the second one is R, as you mentioned. But Python is, I would say, well, maybe it's heresy, but Python is better because it's general programming language also. So you can do machine learning, but you can also do some application, which is not related to machine learning. But in R, you can do only statistical analysis. So it's only, focus on the small part of the programming, I would say. But okay. R is very good as a machine learning tool also. But we use Python because we know Python better. That's also our choice.
Okay, and from the other side, referring to what you were reporting about the motivation of Generation Z, it's a fascinating topic.
Yeah,
I wonder what will happen. I wonder what happens after the corona entered. Probably many things have changed. Right.
Yeah, so we already do some analysis. So for example, the reasonable part which results from this analysis is that the connection with the boss is not so highly correlated because the people work from home, so they don't see boss often. So
yes, that's right.
That was what was missing in this analysis
and
during coronavirus.
Yes, and it's probably a very big change in the psychology of a worker, of people as they function.
Yeah, we also see it, but I don't want to see it to explain it now because we try to publish it. So maybe later, maybe next time.
Not reveal the secret before it's published. Okay, thank you.
But it's a very good question, yeah, and very interesting one.
Thank you.
Can I have a short question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so from your experience, what is the most difficult data analysis? So which part of data are the most difficult for machine learning? So do you have any special cases where you have come across very big problems?
Well, it's the work of, well, I think Maciej is the more experienced person here because I start machine learning like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So I'm at the beginning, but from maybe some general comments. So machine learning scientists are more like detectives. So you get some data and you try to find some patterns, and it's not obvious what you have to apply in the first place. So you have to experiment a lot to find proper methods. So it's not like straightforward. You get data and you know what to do, but you get data and you spend say week or weekend for analyzing it, trying this or this, and after you find something, then you proceed. So it's not obvious how to start. So each data, every data are different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I have no prescription for general method.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree with Dr. Kycia that there is no strict recipe how to perform with the data, which algorithm to choose, which parameters. You just have to make experiments and based on this way, figure out what's the best tool